Digital India. Educated India.
In this module, we will learn about the concept of carbon footprint. I will start with the figure that I have already shown about the different sustainability assessment methods. We have already looked at the first category of methods, which was indicators and indices. We have looked at selected indicators and indices and learnt about the calculation method. The reason I have circled both the indicators and indices as well as product related assessment is because you can consider footprint calculation as being part of both these methods. You can say that footprint calculations are indicators because they tell you about a specific aspect of the product or a process, but you can also consider footprint calculation as a subset of life cycle assessment, which is a much more comprehensive method of product related assessment, and that's why I have circled both in this particular figure. So moving on to footprint calculations, the broad definition is that footprint is a measure of the direct and indirect impact of products, processes, individuals, or a group of people. And I would like you to understand the importance of direct and indirect impacts, and this will become evident when we look at the calculation procedures and some of the results based on footprint calculations already done. Footprint calculations are mainly performed for carbon footprint and water footprint. These are very commonly done, but some work has also been done on nitrogen footprint, although it is not that common. In this particular course, we will only learn about carbon and water footprint, and this particular module will focus on carbon footprint calculations. So the reason we focus on carbon footprint is because carbon plays a very important role in climate change. As we have previously seen in this course, climate change is one of the major concerns, and it is driven by greenhouse gas emissions, and carbon dioxide is one of the major greenhouse gases. So this picture broadly shows the global carbon cycle, and as you can see, carbon actually moves from one system to another, or one component of the ecosystem to another component of ecosystem dynamically. So there is always this flux going on. The problem is because there is excess amount of CO2 being emitted into the atmosphere, which increases the atmospheric CO2 concentration, leading to climate change. And that's why there is so much interest in carbon cycle and subsequently carbon footprint calculations. So the carbon footprint basically quantifies the greenhouse gas emissions, and not only the direct greenhouse gas emissions but also the indirect emissions. When the carbon footprint calculations were originally proposed, the focus was mainly on carbon dioxide, because at that time it was assumed that carbon dioxide is the main factor leading to climate change. Now, in terms of quantity, that might be true, but subsequently it was realized that there are several other greenhouse gases which in terms of quantity might be smaller but may have a much higher impact on a per mole or a per kg basis, and therefore the scope of carbon footprint was subsequently broadened to include other greenhouse gases which were identified as per the Kyoto Protocol, and this includes methane, nitrous oxide, HFCs, PFCs, and so on. And the results of a carbon footprint calculation are represented in terms of kgs or tons of CO2 equivalent. So this is the unit that was used to measure the global warming potential. So there is some similarity between global warming potential and carbon footprint. So let us try to understand how carbon footprint calculation is done. The calculation itself is basically about accounting. You have to look at all the resources and all the emissions and try to quantify the carbon emissions or GHG emissions related to that particular resource or activity or emission. So the calculation itself is divided into three scopes. Scope 1 is about direct emissions which are typically because of fossil fuels, and we will see examples of these subsequently. Scope 2 is because of electricity consumption, only electricity consumption and nothing else. And scope 3 is because of all the other indirect emissions that could be related to the raw materials used or the transportation activities related to the raw material procurement and so on. Now I will explain all these three scopes by using a very generic example of a manufacturing facility. So a typical manufacturing facility will look something like this. Whatever is shown in the dashed line are the steps that are generally there within a manufacturing facility boundary. So a particular facility will have raw material which is procured from outside, and there will be storages, inventories and so on. But the raw material will first go some kind of a pre-processing, could be size reduction, drying, purification and so on. It will be followed by some kind of processing or converting it from one form to another. It could be a chemical process, it could be a mechanical process, but some kind of processing will be done. It is possible that in order to do this processing, some additional chemicals, catalysts, solvents or materials will be required, so those will be added. Typically after any manufacturing, some kind of purification is required. So again, for that we may require solvents, chemicals and so on. And finally packaging and inventory will be done, for which again packaging material like plastic or paper will be brought from outside. And finally the product will be delivered. Most of the manufacturing facilities and certainly almost all chemical processing facilities have steam requirement, which means they require a boiler. So boiler will provide steam as shown in these arrows, but boiler will itself run on some kind of a fuel, either natural gas, coal or some kind of an oil, and that fuel is typically procured from outside. And this complete facility will require electricity inputs. Almost all steps will require some kind of an electricity input, be it in the form of pumps, compressors and so on, or just the overall management of the facility. So this diagram typically represents a typical manufacturing process. Whatever is shown in the dashed box is what is existing within the plant boundary, and whatever is shown outside is coming from outside and used by the plant. This is an example of a cement manufacturing facility. So this is a pictorial representation of cement manufacturing, and what is shown in the dashed line is typically the actual manufacturing facility. The raw material, in this case limestone, is coming from outside. It will be stored somewhere in the facility and subsequently will be put into the process. You will require coal, which again comes from outside. There is also a requirement of some secondary additives which will be purchased from outside and stored at the facility and used as and when required in the process. In the last stage, as I said, there will be packaging, for which the bags again will be purchased from outside. So the black arrow shows the material that comes from outside. Now going back to this figure, this generic figure, I want you to pause this video and think about the scope 1, scope 2 and scope 3 emissions. Which of these emissions will come under scope 1, which will come under scope 2 and which will come under scope 3. So let us start looking sequentially. So scope 1 emission, as was mentioned in the definition, are direct emissions within the facility. So in this picture I have only shown the dashed box and components within the dashed box, because that is what we said is part of the facility. So the emissions that will come out will be mainly from boiler, because boiler will burn some kind of a fuel, and CO2 and possibly some other greenhouse gases might be generated. So these are the emissions, GHG emissions. It is possible that during the purification process or some of the other processing steps, additional greenhouse gases might be generated. So because these emissions are happening within the boundary of the facility, they are classified as scope 1 emissions. And depending on the facility, could be many such points where the scope 1 emissions occur. A refinery, for example, will have several such locations where scope 1 emissions are happening. Now moving on to scope 2. Scope 2, as I said, includes electricity. Now the reason is that electricity often is very carbon intensive, electricity production. If you take the example of India, about 50 to 60% of electricity in India is coming from coal, which means the actual production of electricity is going to be carbon intensive, and it will lead to a lot of carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions. And therefore, although the electricity generation is happening somewhere else and the facility is using the electricity, it should be the emissions because of production of that electricity must be attributed to this particular facility. Although it is physically not on this site, it is happening somewhere else, but it is still because of this facility that the electricity is being produced. That's the argument that is used, and therefore those emissions must be considered. So all the emissions, all the carbon emissions because of electricity production will come under scope 2. Scope 3 will include everything else that is not produced within the facility but that is brought from outside. And this is actually very important, and this is something that is not immediately obvious. Let's take the example of boiler fuel. Let us say the boiler fuel is natural gas. Now, combustion of natural gas generates greenhouse gas emissions, and that is part of the scope 1 emissions. But the production of natural gas itself will lead to some GHG emissions. If the natural gas is, let's say, in some kind of an offshore reserve, then there are offshore platforms which will take out the gas from the reserves. Now that operation will require some energy, some electricity, which will lead to greenhouse gas emissions. Similarly, the gas will need to be purified, will need to be compressed, it will need to be pumped and brought to the facility. All of these activities will lead to the generation of some GHG or emission of some greenhouse gases. So in scope 3, you consider those particular emissions. So again, to repeat, when it comes to natural gas usage, there are two emissions. One is happening at the site, which is because of the burning of natural gas, that will come under scope 1. But the emissions because of this production of natural gas will come under scope 3. And the same logic will apply to all the other materials that are used. So any raw material that you use will require some processing, some purification, some activities which will lead to carbon emissions, and those will come under scope 3. Any chemical that is manufactured, again emissions because of that will come under scope 3. Similarly for the packaging material. So all these which we can classify as indirect emissions will come under scope 3. Now you can say that electricity is also scope 3 technically because it is not on the facility, and that is true, but electricity is generally considered as a separate part because of two reasons. One, electricity often plays an important role, or it has an important contribution in the overall impact. Second, it is relatively easier to quantify the emissions because of electricity. So going back to the example of cement production, this is a picture from a particular study which is mentioned at the bottom of this slide. So this diagram shows the emissions because of cement production, and you should go back and check the literature. Cement manufacturing is a fairly energy and carbon intensive process. So this analysis shows that clinker production step is the most important step that leads to the most greenhouse gas emissions, and the indirect or scope 3 emissions are actually less than 10%. So emissions related to quarrying, transport, grinding and preparation of raw material and so on are less than 10%. Most of the emissions are actually direct scope 1 emission in a cement production facility. Now this may not be true for every facility, this is just one of the examples. So the important learning outcomes of this module are: first, we understood the concept of carbon footprint. It quantifies the GHG emission, and we learnt about the different scopes of carbon footprint calculations and what comes under what scope. So this is the figure that captures the different scopes of carbon footprint calculations. This was discussed in the previous module. Scope 1 is direct emissions, scope 2 is electricity related emissions, and scope 3 includes other indirect emissions. Now here in this module, I particularly want to discuss the importance of scope 3 emissions, because the general feeling is that scope 1 and scope 3 will be the most important contributors to the overall impact, and that is certainly true for several processes and products. But there are many other examples where scope 3 impacts and emissions are very critical. So I will discuss one example to convince you about the role of scope 3 emissions. So this picture is, this plot shows the direct emissions of carbon dioxide in various parts of the world. So there are plots pertaining to countries like China, India, United States, Japan, and so on. Similarly, there is one plot which is in green color for the European Union. The source of this particular plot is mentioned in the on the slide. If you look at these particular plots, trend that comes forth is that the direct emissions of carbon dioxide are going down for US and Europe. If you look at the blue line, which is for the US, and if you look at the green line, which is for the European Union, you see that the total direct carbon emissions are either going down or more or less flat, which means that these two regions are actually doing very well for the last about 20 years or so in terms of carbon emissions. If you look at China, in contrast, the carbon emissions have exploded. Beginning around 2000, the carbon emissions have started to rise very rapidly, and something similar is happening with India also, although not to the same level, but the emissions are rising. So the developed countries like European Union and United States, they often give this argument saying that the lifestyle or the emissions have gone down, the lifestyle has improved and the emissions have gone down in those countries, and the problem of global warming is now because of what is happening in countries like China and India. This is another plot with very similar information, which this is more recent. So this gives you the contribution of different countries and regions to the total GHG emission, and this has for a longer horizon, the data for a longer horizon. And here again you see the same trend, that the European Union emissions, direct emissions, have gone down in the last 15 to 20 years. United States also has gone down a little bit, or at least stayed constant, but China and India have increased significantly. Now the question is whether this blame on India and China is fair. Is it fair for United States and European Union to blame India and China for climate change? Now I want you to pause this video, think about this, make up your answer, and then move on to the next slide. So this is where the analysis gets interesting and counterintuitive and contradicts what was discussed on the previous two slides. So in the previous two slides, we looked at the direct emissions in different countries, and the direct emissions in US and Europe are going down. Now this study was done to understand the CO2 embodied in global trade. So these arrows basically represent the trade between different regions and the CO2 embodied in that trade. So for example, if a product was manufactured in China and it was exported to the US, then the carbon emissions that actually happened in China, and therefore were direct emissions in China for that product manufacturing, those are captured by this arrow. So obviously the width of the arrow indicates the magnitude of such emissions. So to elaborate a little bit more, the arrow going from China to the US shows the CO2 emissions that happened actually in China, but those emissions were because of the manufacturing of a product or products that were eventually sent and consumed in the United States. So going back to the terminologies of carbon footprint calculations, all these emissions are categorized as scope 3, because as far as the country of US is concerned, they didn't happen within the boundary of the country. So they are not scope 1 emissions. They are scope 3 emissions because the product was manufactured somewhere else, in this case China, and it was imported. And you see a similar kind of a situation between China and Europe also. There is a fairly thick arrow that goes between China and European Union. Now what this tells you is that although the direct emissions in China are increasing rapidly, as we saw on the previous slides, most of it is happening because of the manufacturing of products that are eventually consumed either in the European Union or the US. So you can actually make an argument saying that the emissions should be actually attributed to these countries, European Union and US, because if the products were not in demand in those countries, those products wouldn't be manufactured in China, and therefore the direct emissions in China will not be so high. So this is one example, and one very impactful example, which shows how important scope 3 emissions could be. And there are several such situations. There are several such instances when scope 3 emissions, which are related to the product that is manufactured, the raw material or a product that is manufactured somewhere else, has a very high impact, and the actual direct impacts are very low. And in such cases, if you limit your carbon footprint calculations only to scope 1 or maybe scope 2, you will get very misleading information, because scope 3 emissions, which contributes a significant factor to the overall emissions, is completely ignored. And that is why whenever you are doing carbon footprint calculations, it is very important to consider all 3 scopes in your calculations. So this plot again elaborates on the same data that was shown previously. So this shows again carbon emitted embedded in trade, and a positive number indicates that the country is net carbon importer. So you see countries like Sweden and Belgium have more than 60% of their carbon emission which is important, which means the manufacturing is happening somewhere else and the carbon is embodied in the trade which is coming into these countries. In contrast, countries like India and China are net exporter because most of the manufacturing happens in India and China. Now, to summarize the overall concept of carbon footprint, the advantages of doing carbon footprint calculations are: first, it provides a very detailed assessment of GHG emissions, and GHG emissions are very critical when you talk about climate change and global warming. Secondly, the method is comprehensive and therefore it provides the direct as well as indirect emissions, as we saw in the couple of examples in this module. However, there are certain limitations also. One limitation is that scope 3 emissions are often not very easy to calculate. Although it was mentioned that scope 3 emissions could be very important, but they are not often very easy to calculate. They are difficult to calculate because of data availability or lack of information about the source of a particular raw material. The second limitation, of course, is that the carbon footprint calculation only tells you about the GHG impact. It doesn't tell you about anything else. And from that perspective, it is like an indicator. But it also falls under a product-based assessment category because it looks at both direct as well as indirect emissions. So these are the learning outcomes of this module. Carbon footprint quantifies GHG emissions. There are different scopes, different levels of details. Scope 3 emissions or indirect emissions can often be very important and therefore should not be ignored. But at the same time, scope 3 emissions are also more difficult to calculate.